Hi, friends, and welcome to a long overdue episode of Bite Size Bish. Yesterday, some news broke about Amanda Batula and Kyle Cook separating and getting a divorce, and Brooklyn Beckham went to social media to mention it all about the Beckham family. And I just thought this is definitely something that I wanted to talk about. I will talk about it in greater depth on the next podcast, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to inform everybody if you hadn't heard on social media, and B, to talk a little bit about what I think is going on. So Amanda Batula posted yesterday the announcement. After much reflection, we have mutually and amicably decided to part ways as a couple. We share this with a heavy heart and kindly ask for your grace and support while we focus on our personal growth and healing. It feels ironic to ask for privacy during this time since we've always tried to be open and honest about our relationship. But your kindness and respect will go a long way as we try to navigate our next chapter. Signed, Amanda and Kyle. So the internet is abuzz with this. Reactions are generally not surprised and people hoping that, Amanda will finally be free and happy and all of that. And so my thought on this is that, of course, I'm not surprised, especially after what we heard at BravoCon. The rumors that Kyle stayed over a fan's house until 6 a.m. And this was allegedly the kind of precipitator of this event. And for those of us who have watched Summer House forever, myself included, we saw Amanda and Kyle get together. And the one thing that I want to say is that no matter what happens, it is a sad situation when two people who really have love for one another just are not able to make it work for one reason or another. And I think that's the saddest part here is because, Kyle, everyone likes to make fun of him for being douchey, and he definitely has King Baby vibes, right? For sure. His whole DJ career and going out. And I think he prioritized a lot of things over Amanda, and Amanda finally got sick of it, understood that she deserves better than that. But at the end of the day, it's sad because you could see that they genuinely loved one another. And here's the thing. Kyle, I think, created a lot of this with his behaviors, but at the same time, he's human. And so I send love to he and Amanda as they're, going through this whole situation. I will be watching Summer House with a magnifying glass because when they were filming Summer House, obviously a lot of this stuff was going on or in process. And so I will have my magnifying glass and be, all the signs and interesting things that come up on Summer House next season. We're getting that spinoff with Lindsay and Sierra in the city. And they were like, oh my gosh, is Amanda going to be joining this? Who knows? So I love Amanda Batula. I think she is a very sweet, lovely, really good human. And I just wish her all the best as she works on recovering from this. Also, I feel that I appreciated their comment about, we understand that it's kind of ridiculous to ask for privacy. It's not ridiculous. That's the wrong word, but they understand that they're in the public eye and, the Bravo fandom is what kind of helped them be famous and all of that. So I just appreciated that acknowledgement. And I don't know. I just hope that they're both happier and healthier apart. Because at the end of the day, divorce isn't a bad thing if it leads to better outcomes for both people, increased happiness, increased healthiness, all of that sort of stuff, like psychologically, physically, the whole thing. I definitely know one thing, being in a relationship that no longer serves us is really taxing. It's hard physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So I'm grateful for everyone involved that eventually, once healing starts to happen, hopefully they'll be in a better place. But after BravoCon, I am definitely not surprised. And after watching Summer House all these seasons, I am also not surprised. I just think that Kyle was never able to give her what she really wanted and needed, number one. And number two, on social media, Amanda did an interview where she talked about not having a prenuptial agreement. The Bravo Docket ladies talked a little bit about that as well. If you want to check out their thoughts on it, check them out on Instagram, the Bravo Docket. They talked about this a little bit. I just think in general, it's always good to protect ourselves. Amanda admitted in this interview that she, kind of was led by romanticism and the movies that tell you, we don't want to prepare our marriage like for separation or divorce. But one thing that the Bravo Docket lady said, which I agree, is that preparing to cover yourself financially is not preparing for divorce. And so I think that their advice, which would be mine too, is that just do the best thing for yourself, not thinking about divorce or separation, but just, being covered financially and things like that. We've seen a lot of Bravo Lebs who have, made some not so great decisions when it comes to that sort of stuff. Candy Burris and Todd, for example, they're a good example of Candy was not getting married without that prenup. And Todd was trying and trying and trying. And we watched the whole thing play out on Real Housewives of Atlanta. I forget what season that was. But now they're getting divorced. And guess who has that rock solid prenup? Candy Burris. And here's the thing. Candy is a very smart woman. She's a smart businesswoman. She's a boss bitch extraordinaire. She is worldwide, okay? She knows what's up. So if Candy Burris gets a prenup, you should get one too. That's my advice. So moving on to the Brooklyn Beckham stuff, the one thing that I wanted to read is what he said on social media, because I think that when people come forward and they talk about their experiences, obviously I'm not his therapist, I'm not your therapist, I'm not anybody's therapist, but I have worked with a lot of people over the years who have cut off contact from parents. And in my experience, the people who do that, nobody wants to have to cut off contact with a parent. Nobody wants that. Nobody is born into a family dynamic and think to themselves, gee, one day I hope to create a real problem and not talk to my parents. I don't care how old you are, how famous you are, what part of the world or society you live in. The one constant that unites all human beings is that the two people we need in this life are our parents. And maybe not necessarily biological, adoptive, foster, grandparent, parent figures, I'm saying. But there are only two people in this whole world who are supposed to, by definition, by biology, love us unconditionally, which is our parents. And when we don't get that love we need from our parents, it creates such a painful experience internally that I just wanted to say this off the bat, is that nobody wants to have to do this. And so for those of you who have cut off contact with parents and you're triggered by this, I understand. First, let me read what Brooklyn posted. I have been silent for years and made every effort to keep these matters private. Unfortunately, my parents and their team have continued to go to the press, leaving me with no choice but to speak for myself and tell the truth about only some of the lies that have been printed. I do not want to reconcile with my family. I'm not being controlled. I'm standing up for myself for the first time in my life. For my entire life, my parents have controlled narratives in the press about our family. The performative social media posts, family events, and inauthentic relationships have been a fixture of the life I was born into. Recently, I have seen with my own eyes the lengths they'll go through to place countless lies in the media, mostly at the expense of innocent people, to preserve their own facade. But I do believe the truth always comes out. My parents have been endlessly trying to ruin my relationship since before my wedding, and it hasn't stopped. My mom, meaning Victoria Beckham, canceled making Nicola's dress in the 11th hour despite how excited she was to wear her design, forcing her to urgently find a new dress. That's interesting. Weeks before our big day, my parents repeatedly pressured and attempted to bribe me into signing away the rights to my name, which would have affected me, my wife, and our future children. They were adamant on me signing before my wedding date because then the terms of the deal would be initiated. My holdout affected the payday, and they have never treated me the same since. During the wedding planning, my mom went so far as to call me quote-unquote evil, because Nicola, his wife, and I chose to include my nanny Sandra and Nicola's nanny at our table because they both didn't have their husbands. Both of our parents had their own tables equally adjacent to ours. The night before our wedding, members of my family told me that Nicola was not blood, quote, and quote, not family. Since the moment I started standing up for myself with my family, I've received endless attacks from my parents, both privately and publicly, that were sent to the press on their orders. Even my brothers were sent to attack me on social media before they ultimately blocked me out of nowhere this last summer. My mom hijacked my first dance with my wife, which had been planned weeks in advance, to a romantic love song. In front of our 500 wedding guests, Mark Anthony called me to the stage, where in the schedule was planned to be my romantic dance with my wife, but instead, my mom was waiting to dance with me instead. She danced very inappropriately on me in front of everyone. That's a really important point to remember. I've never felt more uncomfortable or humiliated in my entire life. We wanted to renew our vows so we could create new memories of our wedding day that brings us joy and happiness, not anxiety and embarrassment. Yikes. My wife has been consistently disrespected by my family, no matter how hard we've tried to come together as one. My mom has repeatedly invited women from my past into our lives in ways that were clearly intended to make us both uncomfortable. Despite this, we still traveled to London for my dad's birthday, and we were rejected for a week as we waited in our hotel room trying to plan quality time with him. He refused all of our attempts unless it was at this big birthday party with 100 guests and cameras at every corner. When he finally agreed to see me, it was under the condition that Nicola wasn't invited. It was a slap in the face. Later, when my family traveled to LA, they refused to see me at all. He finishes with, my family values public promotion and endorsements above all else. Brand Beckham comes first. Family quote-unquote love is decided by how much you post on social media or how quickly you drop everything to show up and pose for a family photo app, even if that's the expense of our professional obligations. We've gone out of our way for years to show up and support at every fashion show, every party, every press activity to show our quote-unquote perfect family. But the one time my wife asked for my mom's support to save displaced dogs during the LA fires, my mom refused. The narrative that my wife controls me is completely backwards. I have been controlled by my parents for most of my life. I grew up with overwhelming anxiety. For the first time in my life since stepping away from my family, that anxiety has disappeared. I wake up every morning grateful for the life I choose and have found peace and relief. My wife and I do not want a life shaped by image press or manipulation. All we want is peace, privacy, and happiness for us and our future family. Wow. So in my experience, working with children, thinking about cutting off those relationships, and adults who have cut off contact with parents, a couple of things stand out to me from this announcement that he made is that one thing you will always find among people like this who have experienced this, the parent embarrassed them at a huge event or something that was really, really important to them. So what happens is when we're born into this family dynamic, when it's really unhealthy, which I know something about personally and professionally, is that you're either supposed to maintain the status quo, and if you don't, you're the agitator, you're the problem, you're the black sheep. So the black sheep becomes the person who ends up just wanting to do things different, or they don't like the way that the system is working. What will happen is the system will always react to that. Similar tactics to domestic abuse, which is isolation, insane expectations in terms of their participation in the system. Like when I jump, you're supposed to say how high. Systems like this, they don't tolerate dissent. And so when you have someone who dissents because they're uncomfortable with the inherently unhealthy system, that person is labeled the problem, which Brooklyn, to be clear, is being labeled the problem. And what I read when I read this is someone who has had their voice taken away for a long time because of the Beckham brand. And if I'm going to be honest, psychologically speaking, when you are as famous as David and Victoria Beckham and your livelihood relies on the fact that you're this famous public figure with this brand and all of that, they can't have anything that makes them look bad. And the other thing that happens with these really unhealthy family systems is that when a partner comes in, it really rocks the boat. Because I compare this to someone leaving a cult. When we meet a partner who can reflect, wow, these experiences have been really unhealthy, they've been really scary. And number one, they get kind of identified by the system as kind of like a suppressive person, like Scientology would say. And the other thing is that for people who escape cults, which I'm kind of comparing it to that a little bit, is that the things that happen to them, they can tolerate. But when they see it happening to somebody else they love, sometimes that breaks through some of that cognitive dissonance. And I think that Brooklyn's relationship with his wife helped him break through some cognitive dissonance to understand what the system is about. The system is about wealth and appearances and, towing the company line. And Brooklyn is like, well, that has cost me my mental health, so I'm not going to do that anymore. And to that, I say kudos, number one. And number two, I believe Brooklyn, and I think we all should. I think it's important when people do things like this. Nobody wants to blow up their lives, and nobody wants to live without the only two people in our life who is really supposed to love us. Nobody wants to do that. So when I read this, I can feel the pain, and it seems like it's taken a long time for Brooklyn to get here. And I just say kudos. I believe Brooklyn, and I think we all should. When people speak up, when they've been through really challenging experiences, I don't like that the internet's first reaction is, oh, he's just looking for fame. Because I'm pretty sure if he was looking for that, he would have towed the company line and just went along with it. That would have been the easiest thing to do. What he's doing isn't easy. This is not easy. This is not for the faint of heart. And for everybody listening to this who may be estranged from your family, your parents, I'm sorry that you've been misunderstood and treated poorly. It's just never something anybody wants to do. I just cannot emphasize that enough. And I think that Victoria and David Beckham, they haven't responded, but I'm sure the response will be gaslighting and this is not true and let's tell our side of the story. And it's like, well, what side? This is how this child feels growing up in this dynamic. And who are we to tell Brooklyn Beckham this is not your experience? I'm certainly not going to say that. The thing most people misunderstand about this process is that when you cut off a relationship with your parents, it never stops being sad. You never stop grieving the fact that the two people who were supposed to love me in this world just aren't capable of giving me what I need. That never stops being sad. That never stops being hard. I don't care if you're famous, if you're an average Joe, it just never stops being painful. I'd imagine also being famous and having these people be, so huge, it actually does make the process harder because then you have people who are saying, Brooklyn is a spoiled brat and all these other things. And I'm like, no, we don't buy that, honey. Because, the thing about Victoria dancing inappropriately and undermining the plans that they had for their wedding, I think that speaks a lot to her character. And if I'm being honest, David and Victoria Beckham are so famous. They have such a huge brand that I think it would take truly an immense amount of work, psychologically speaking, to stay grounded, to stay humble, to maintain being a good human being. When fame is given to you, a lot of fame, you really have to work hard at that. I don't think that they're doing that. That's just personally what I see. I don't think that they're doing that. Especially, I think their only job is to make their children feel loved and supported, and they certainly haven't done that job. And that's really, really sad. So that's just my 2 cents on the whole situation. I will talk about this in more detail next podcast, next Tuesday. But I just wanted to get this episode out and share my immediate thoughts about it. Now, at the end, right now, what I'm going to do is give a brief health update. So if that's not something that interests you, please feel free to tune out. If it is something that interests you, it's a little complicated, but here we go. So the MRI of my ear came back. For those who maybe don't know what happened, I had a sudden sensory neural hearing loss in my right ear, suddenly and unexpectedly. And for weeks, I've just been hearing beep, literally for weeks, just beep, 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 beep. Tinnitus, it's actually insane. I love listening to music, and music just sounds like feedback, and it's just been really frustrating. So the good news is that the MRI came back clear. There's no tumor, acoustic neuroma, or anything like that. My blood test results have come back negative to look for autoimmune hearing loss. I'm kind of in limbo with this issue right now. I'm following up with ENT in a couple of weeks, but the problem is I met with my oncologist who was really upset that when I went to see ENT, they didn't do a scope. And this is, I share this because sometimes this is part of the problem with being a professional patient and being reliant on the healthcare system is irreparably broken. It just is. And having to rely on a dysfunctional system to stay alive, it triggers a lot of my childhood trauma. Speaking of Brooklyn, Beckham, and right, that whole thing. So having to depend on a broken system that is intent on not helping me, gaslighting me, things like that, it makes it all harder. But my oncologist is concerned about CLL infiltrating my tonsils and creating some issues with eustachian tubes that could be causing the hearing issue. But ENT didn't do a scope, and it's not my responsibility to know that I should have asked for that. So my oncologist is really upset and wants me to see somebody else. So I'm just trying to navigate that all now. In terms of my CLL, the good news and the bad news is CLL wants to kill me really slowly. It's not like my previous ovarian cancer where it was like, let's pull the fire alarm. We have to act now. You're going to die. This is like CLL is a very different animal. And so I have to remember that. And the other thing I have to remember is that in the very broken healthcare system, there are good people, right? Just like in the world, right? The world, especially the United States right now, is in a very broken place. But there are good people. There are helpers. There are people who advocate and want to do good work. And so I have to remember that the same exists in healthcare, just harder to find those people. And so right now, I've kind of caught up with medical technology. To be clear, I take immunotherapy. It's a pill I take every day that keeps me alive. The immunotherapy that I'm on now didn't exist when I was diagnosed in 2013. And so what has happened is it's created some cardiac issues for me, some supraventricular tachycardia that while it's not going to be fatal right now, if it continues to happen, that'll weaken my heart. And then that's a whole thing. So the cancer in my blood has increased to 25%, but the good thing is that it's stable at that. And so we all agree that I'm going to have to be doing a new treatment, but my oncologist told me that in the next year, there are going to be some wonderful new treatments coming out that are more targeted and are a little bit easier on cardiac health as far as immunotherapy goes. Because, with immunotherapy, you don't lose your hair. In fact, I have magnificent hair. And so people kind of lack understanding about how toxic it can be, especially after you're on it for a really long period of time. And so cardiac health it's very common with immunotherapy to have issues with that after you've been on immunotherapy for a long time. And so that's where we are. Basically, what I have to do is be patient. The medication, there is one medication out now that I could go on, but it tends to create resistance if you go on it too soon. And then that creates a whole host of other problems. So where we are at is that with the CLL, as long as things stay stable and the cancer doesn't increase significantly overnight or there's no major issues with it, then I just have to suck it up. I have to deal with the symptoms that I'm having until hopefully in a year there is something else for me to go on that will be helpful. So I'm meeting with my other oncologist at the end of the month, and I'm going to see what he thinks, because when it comes to this complex stuff, you need multiple eyes on it. And so I'm going to follow up with him, see what he thinks. And as long as we're all in agreement, we're just going to continue to do blood work to monitor and just keep things stable. And thank goodness that medical technology has never been better. It is literally what keeps me alive. It is what keeps me talking to you on this mic right now. If it were not for this medical technology, y'all never would have heard my voice. I never would have podcasted. I would have been a therapist, and then that would have been it. So I'm okay. My mental health has never been in a better place. And this is the reason why I have to work so hard at it, because for most people, this would be crippling. But for me, it's just a Tuesday. It's just a part of what is my life. After chemotherapy for the ovarian cancer and then years of immunotherapy, my body is just chronically ill and it's never going to change. And the older I get, the more issues that happen. And what can I say? I'm grateful for medical technology. I'm grateful for my support system. But most importantly, I'm grateful for myself. I'm grateful for this very, very loud voice that advocates for myself and other marginalized groups on a day-to-day basis. I am proud of how resilient I am in the face of really scary things. When your life is on the line, it can be very scary, very triggering, but I'm just proud of me. I'm proud of me. I'm proud of how I'm handling it. And I feel really good about that. So that's what's up. If there's other updates to give you all after ENT and oncology, I will definitely let you know. I'm also seeing a neurologist. I'm getting an echocardiogram just to, again, make sure there are no immediate issues with my heart. Because if there were, we would have to pivot whether there's better medication coming out or not. We would have to pivot. So when there's updates and when there's news, I'll let you know. But this is kind of how my life is just going to be for ever. So when people are like, oh, I hope you feel better, I hope things get better, I'm like, thanks, they won't. But listen, I have good attitude and I just feel really good about it. And I've never been happier. So, hey, whatever the hell the reason is for that, I'm just really grateful. And most importantly, I'm grateful for those who listen to this podcast consistently, who don't work really hard to misunderstand me, who give me love, support, understanding. I appreciate you because for some reason, people have this kind of oddly off perception about me, and people are really intent on misunderstanding me and miscategorizing me. And that feels like a bummer, but there's really nothing I can do about it. So I just want to say thank you all for listening. Thank you for your support. Patreon, Spreaker Supporters Club, YouTube, however you support me, thank you for all of it. And that's going to be it for me today. So I hope you enjoyed this bite-sized Bish, a little bit of Bravo, a little bit of health update from your Bish. And love to you and yours. And say ta-ta for now. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.